Godfrey Gitau Mwangi, the National Chairman of Former Councillors, is in the Senate to follow proceedings and particularly response by the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury and Economic Planning on question number 015 by the Senator for Meru County, Senator Katuri Murungi, MP, in today's order paper on the delay in the implementation of the resolution of the Senate of 18th of October 2018 and the subsequent recommendations of the Interagency Task Force on the payment of honorarium and monthly pension to former councillors. Honorable Senators, the said Senate resolution arose out of a motion filed by the Senator for Kitui County, Senator Enoch Wambua CBS MP, on payment of a one-off honorarium and monthly pension for former councillors during the 12th Parliament, which was passed by the Senate on the 18th of October 2018. Honorable Senators, on behalf of the Senate and my own behalf, I extend a warm welcome to Dr. Mwangi and wish him a productive visit. Thank you. Now, the Honorable CS is in the House. We will straight away go to question number 15. Honorable CS, welcome to the Senate. Question number 15 is by the Honorable Senator for Meru County, Honorable Katuri Murungi. You may proceed, Honorable Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity to ask this question on behalf of the former councillors who cut across the Republic of Kenya. And so, Mr. Speaker, the question I'm asking is question number 15 to the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Economic Planning. And I want to thank my former colleague in the National Assembly for finding time to come to respond to the questions from the Kenyans. Number one, what are the reasons for the inordinate delay in the implementation of the resolution of the Senate of 18th October 2018 and the subsequent recommendations of the Interagency Task Force on payment of the honorarium and monthly pension for former councillors, despite the undertaking given by the National Treasury via letter dated 28 September 2021 and addressed to the Senate that it will factor the payments in the ensuing financial year 2022-2023. Number B, Honorable Speaker, could the Cabinet Secretary provide the status update on the establishment of the requisite legal and policy instruments to authorize, process, and facilitate payments, and if not, state the reasons for such delay and whether the eligible former councillors have been enrolled in the Inua Jamii program. And number C, when will the former councillors receive their full gratuity payments, and could the Cabinet Secretary state the measures put in place to ensure that for those who are deceased, the rightful beneficiaries are identified? Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable CS, you may now respond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and Honorable Senators, I am grateful for the opportunity to appear before the Senate, conscious of your critical role in our nation's governance, ensuring accountability and representing the interests of the Kenyan people. My aim today is to provide you with a comprehensive response to your questions to achieve the best possible outcomes for our country. I was invited here actually to address two questions, and the first question has been asked, so I will straight away go to address the question that the Senator for Meru County has asked, that is question number 015, asking me to explain the following, that what are the reasons for the inordinate delay in the implementation of the resolution of the Senate of 18th October 2018 and the subsequent recommendations of the Interagency Task Force on payment of the honorarium and monthly pension to former councillors, despite the undertaking granted by the National Treasury via letter dated 28 September 2021 and addressed to the Senate that it would factor the payments in the following year's financial budget of 2022-23. Number B was for me to provide the status update on the establishment of the requisite legal and policy instruments to authorize, process, and facilitate payments, and if not, state the reasons for such delay and whether the eligible former councillors have been enrolled in the Inua Jamii program. Number C, which is the last one, was when will the former councillors receive their full gratuity payments, and could my office state the measures put in place to ensure that for those who are deceased, the rightful beneficiaries are identified? So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to respond to the questions raised by the Senator for Meru County regarding the payment of honoraria and monthly pensions to former councillors as follows. Number one, regarding reasons for the delay in implementation of the Senate resolution and task force recommendations. Mr. Speaker, the delay is in implementing the Senate resolution of 18th October 2018 and the recommendations of the Interagency Task Force on the payment of honoraria and pensions to former councillors has been primarily due to legal constraints. The Attorney General, who is the official government advisor on legal matters, in a legal opinion dated 8th May 2023, advised that there was no legal basis to support the proposed one-off honoraria payment of Kenya shillings 200,000 to former councillors who served for less than 20 years. The opinion also referenced circular number 13894, issued by the then Ministry of Local Government, which limited pension or gratuity payments to councillors who had served continuously for 20 years or more as of 13th December 1993. Furthermore, the legal advisory highlighted the absence of a structured formula to determine benefits, given that councillors were not salaried or were not being paid salaries, but received allowances that varied across different regions. Consequently, implementing the proposed payment of 2,383,800,000 to about 11,919 former councillors lacks the necessary legal and policy foundation. The second question was the status of legal and policy instruments to authorize and facilitate the payments. Mr. Speaker, given the legal constraints that I've just mentioned, the National Treasury has considered an alternative approach through the Inua Jamii program, which is designed as a social protection initiative for elderly citizens. Former councillors who meet the eligibility criteria form part of the persons for inclusion in the program. The State Department for Social Protection, in collaboration with the relevant government agencies, including the National Treasury, has been verifying eligible registrants into the program. We shall collaborate with the State Department for Social Protection to identify the number of former councillors already enrolled and facilitating the registration of those who have not yet been enrolled. In addition, the National Retirement Benefits Policy, which was approved by the Cabinet in October 2023, also aims to provide a harmonized framework for administering retirement benefits across all sectors. This policy will guide future considerations on the retirement welfare of various categories of public service workers, including former councillors, by ensuring a structured and legally sound approach to retirement benefits. To further strengthen the legal framework, the government established a multi-agency committee on 17 September 2024 to review and align public service pension schemes with the Constitution of Kenya 2010. This committee is expected to provide recommendations on how best to address pension coverage for different categories of public service workers in a sustainable and legally compliant manner. On timelines for full gratuity payments and measures for identifying beneficiaries of deceased councillors, Mr. Speaker, in light of the legal challenges, the National Treasury will engage the Office of the Auditor General to conduct a forensic audit of the 328 former councillors who were initially identified as eligible for benefits. This audit will verify those who are still alive and identify rightful beneficiaries for those who are deceased. The findings of this audit will guide the next course of action in ensuring that only eligible former councillors or their rightful beneficiaries are considered under existing government social protection mechanisms. Mr. Speaker, the government remains committed to addressing the welfare of former councillors within the confines of the law and available resources. While the initial recommendations of the Senate and Task Force lacked legal backing, the alternative approach through Inua Jamii, coupled with the broader national retirement benefits policy, seeks to provide sustainable and legally sound interventions for retired public servants. I submit.
Yes, Senator Kathuri, you have any supplementary question?
Honorable Speaker, thank you very much indeed. Honorable Speaker, this is a matter of national interest. And if you can indulge us, maybe you can give us a bit of time to ventilate on this matter, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, this matter was canvassed during the last Senate. And I'm happy that the member who raised that matter is in this House. There is for the Senate. Honorable Minority Leader. Honorable Minority Leader. No, I wanted to catch the ear of the Speaker because for sure this is a matter of national interest, Honorable Speaker. And we want to, maybe if you can give us some indulgence, especially when asking the supplementary questions, because our former colleagues, councillors, have really given an input to this republic. They actually laid the foundation where today we lay our legs on. So, Mr. Speaker, with your indulgence, maybe the senators who might be interested, you can give us some leeway to really ask the right questions because those councillors have no other forum except this House, especially the Senate, so that we can canvass this matter. And Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Dr. Mwangi for availing his time also to appear here on behalf of almost 1,500 councillors as their chairman. So, Mr. Speaker, you can see the interest that this matter has. And therefore, first of all, I want to inform the CS that the payment of these councillors was an undertaking by Honorable Ambassador Ukula, who was the CS, National Treasury and Planning. And this matter came through this House, Mr. Speaker. What we are trying to unlock today is the resolution of the Senate on the 18th of October 2018. When this matter was canvassed here, the matter was raised by the one and only the Senator for Kitui, who is, by God's grace, he is present in this House.
Senator Kathuri, just proceed to ask your supplementary question. Because
the
dashboard is full here, and the more you...
It is the first time we are hearing that there was another legal opinion which was sought with the AG, and the AG gave an opinion that there was no legal basis for payment of these honorarium or the pensions to these councillors, Mr. Speaker. That was last year, 2023. So from the time this matter was canvassed up to the 2023 legal issue that the AG raised, we don't know what happened and who is this trying to frustrate the councillors. Mr. Speaker, it is actually, if there is no legal basis, it is the AG who should work tirelessly to ensure that we have a legal framework to give them their pension or whatever they worked for. So, Mr. Speaker, the CS, I don't want my former colleague to go into this route. That is the one who has not been able to pay the councillors. He has been unable
Senator
to pay.
Okay. Senator for Meru, Senator Kathuri. What is your question to the Honorable CS?
My question is, Mr. Speaker, is that I have fully stated my stand that it is the first time again this matter is arising. Even the chairman is not aware about the legal opinion by the AG. I don't know who sneaks these opinions so that these people don't get money. A very little money, less than even 200 million, Mr. Speaker, sir. This country is shaming itself. These are former leaders who really need support. They don't have even money to pay for SHA. Because I met the former councillors from Meru. Very old ones, they have even no 300 shillings to pay for SHA. And then there is a group somewhere which is frustrating them not to pay them 200,000 per councillor, those who served for less than 3 terms. So, Mr. Speaker, my question is to reform back the Treasury. We don't need that legal opinion. It can be quashed again by this House, Mr. Speaker. So these Wazee can get their pension, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, that is why, this matter is not about the questions, but needed to see.
Senator Fomero, with all that, what are you asking the Honorable
the CS to set aside that legal opinion and pay the councillors without further delay.
So your question is, could the Honorable CS set aside this
set aside, yes, he set aside that
the
opinion.
legal opinion and proceed to pay? Is that your question?
And if he cannot be able to set aside, he can still request the AG through Treasury. He has that power.
Good.
To request the AG to set aside that opinion or to come up with a legal framework that will enhance the payment of the pension and honorarium to the former councillors, Mr. Speaker.
So, Honorable CS, there are two supplementary questions from Honorable Kathuri. One, are you in a position to set aside the legal opinion? Secondly, if not, can the AG come up with a legal framework within which the former councillors can be paid their money? Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Am I able to set aside the legal opinion of the Attorney General? The answer is no. I don't have that capacity. The Attorney General is actually the legal advisor to the government, and once she has given the opinion, or he has given the opinion, then that opinion, I cannot set it aside. The other issue before us is whether we need to have a legal framework to pay the councillors or former councillors. The answer is yes. I believe legal opinions are based on legal provisions. And so the Attorney General must have been informed by a clear foundation of the law. So the people with the mandate to bring a legislative framework through which councillors can be paid is actually this House. What my advice would be is for Senator Kathuri to make a provision in law that would allow these former councillors to be paid. It's not that I am not interested in supporting these councillors. Many of them come from my place. I know them personally, and I've even met them during my times in politics, and they have complained, and I know what they go through. But for us to be able to pay these former councillors gratuity or pension, there is need for legal framework. Remember, Mr. Speaker, we even have cases of former members of parliament whom I personally made an attempt to provide a legal framework through which they could be paid. And I brought a bill in parliament, which bill was passed, and the president refused to assent to it. But this was in realization that there was no legal framework to pay former MPs. There cannot be lack of legal framework to pay former MPs, which made us to attempt to amend the law, and yet there is a legal framework to pay former councillors. To be honest, if these former councillors have to be paid, there must be change of the law. We all know that even our constitution talks about any money that is paid to anybody who is appearing like a public officer, like I believe councillors would appear, needs to be processed through SRC. But lastly, I want to say that, these councillors were not even drawing a salary. So you don't even know if you are to pay them. You are basing it on what? And the motion by the Senate was a motion. Motion remains an intent. It doesn't have the legal basis to occasion withdrawal of public funds. So the motion remains motion. If it was a bill passed by the House, then that becomes legally binding. But where we are, there is an intention to pay councillors, former councillors, but we lack the legal framework. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Enoch. What guidance are you seeking, Senator, for Kakamega?
Mr. Speaker, I have listened very painfully the difficulty the minister appears to be having. But listening to it and reading it together, listening to it and reading Article 94 of the Constitution, which speaks to the role of Parliament, it says, Mr. Speaker, in 94.5, that no person or body other than Parliament has the power to make a provision having the force of law in Kenya except under the authority conferred by this constitution. Mr. Speaker, we have not come to Nairobi in this house to speak in vain. We do so under the provision of this constitution, which I have read, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, is the minister suggesting that the Attorney General has the power to veto Parliament? This Parliament made a resolution.
Senator Boni, I'll give you an opportunity to ask a question.
No, I was asking for interpretation.
Senator Enoch,
Mr. Speaker, I wanted you to guide us.
I can see your name on the dashboard. I'll give you an opportunity.
Oh, thank you. What?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, clearly for my brother, my friend, my colleague, Waziri Mbadi, the shoe is clearly on the other foot. That's very clear. The shoe is on the other foot. Mr. Speaker, just riding on what Senator Alwale is trying to ask, can Parliament, Mr. Speaker, can this Senate, your Senate that you preside over, Mr. Speaker, can it legislate in vain? Is it possible that senators will sit here, pass resolutions, and they just talk show, the AG seated in an office somewhere decides, no, this is not good enough? Mr. Speaker, the question is, so when the minister received that advisory opinion from the AG, when did he write to you, Mr. Speaker, to tell you that we have received, you made a resolution on this date, we have received an advisory opinion from the AG on this day, and so please act accordingly? Mr. Speaker, I will not belabor the point. The CS fought with me on this matter when he was pushing the agenda of former members of the National Assembly to be compensated. And in front of the Speaker, as I go to sit down, I have a message for the CS from one former member of Parliament from Gitui East, Honorable Mweu. He is still seated waiting for the day that this administration will live up to its word, that the things that had been done wrongly will be done right and people will get their rights under this administration. The Speaker, can your house legislate in vain?
So is that the question to me or to the Honorable CS?
The Speaker, it's just a clever way of getting you to be agitated because somebody is trying to say that you can sit on that chair, preside over a motion, a resolution, the Speaker, push ministries to sit down and come up with a solution to a problem, and then one person, just a stroke of the pen, says all that we have done is in vain. The question is to the CS, can this house, can any house of Parliament legislate in vain?
Senator, to inform who, Honorable? Whom do you want to inform?
Actually, it's the House.
Proceed.
Mr. Honorable Speaker, the CS has not given the right answer because, number one, this was not a motion, Honorable CS. A task force was formed, which included the Ministry of National Treasury and Planning, the Ministry of Devolution and Asal, and the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. So, Mr. Speaker, an interagency task force on payment of honorarium and monthly pension to former councillors was formed so that also to go and negotiate with them. And they negotiated and they agreed on what should be paid. The interagency task force gave proposals, and the 3 CSs appended their signatures in this report that I will table to this House. Yeah? So the 3 CSs who appended signatures to the amount of money that was being paid to the councillors are 1 CS, National Treasury and Planning, Number 2, that was Ambassador Ukula Tan. Number 2, Honorable Eugene Wamarwa, who was the CS then of Minister of Devolution and ASAL, and Honorable Simon Chelugui, who was the CS Minister of Labor and Social Protection. So it is a negotiated package and agreement which was to be provided. And they understand in the year 2022-2023, that is when their monies were to be put into the budget. So, Mr. Speaker, we are not talking of a motion, but a resolution which was communicated now to the clerk of the Senate, from National Treasury and Planning to the clerk of the Senate, and advising the Senate what the interagency task force agreed. And this is a property of the Senate, Mr. Speaker. So we are not talking of a motion passed by the House. It is a resolution from an interministerial task force. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to table this resolution to the Senate so that as we discuss, this matter is not going to be discussed and then we say today we are finished with the CS, but we must review this decision, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for giving me all these indulgences, Honorable Speaker.
Table. Senator for Mombasa. Honorable CS, just note down the questions. You respond them at one go.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika. Nakumbuka mwaka jana wakati kwa kamati ya fedha ya bunge hili, waziri wa zamani wa fedha na hazina alikuja mbele ya komiti wakati tunajadili budget policy statement, na akakomiti kwamba hizo pesa ambazo watakana kulipwa madiwani wa zamani zitawekwa katika bajeti ya mwaka 2023 24-25. Sasa je, ni sawa mawaziri waje katika bunge hili na kamati zake kutoa maelezo ama kutoa majibu ambayo hayalingani? Kwa sababu Profesa Njuguna Ndungu alikuwa ni waziri wa fedha na hazina kuu ya serikali ya Kenya Kwanza. Leo tuko na waziri Mbadi. Je, ni sawa mawaziri kuja na majibu tofauti katika bunge hili? Leo wanakuja wanasema hivi, kesho wanakuja wanasema vile. Asante.
Senator Boni.
Mr. Speaker, our brother Mbadi is a very experienced parliamentarian, and he knows that Parliament does not speak in vain. I leave that to his conscience. But having said that, Mr. Speaker, the former councillors of Nandi County, Uasin Gishu County, and Kakamega County came to see me formally, and they told me that the president had met them and made a commitment just before he won the election that he would ensure this promise by the Jubilee government would be implemented by the... No, that interministerial was during the Jubilee government, that he was aware of that task force and that decision he would implement if elected. Since God has been very kind, President Ruto is now the president, and he committed himself to these councillors. Can the minister undertake, as the financial advisor to the president, to go and make the necessary consultations so that the promise of the president and the expectations of the former councillors converge? We pay our old people. After all, if we pay this 200 million, it's a form of financial stimulus. They will spend the money in public and the economy will be vibrant in their villages, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Olekina.
Asante sana Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, ningependa kufahamu kutoka kwa waziri wa fedha. Je, ni lini jambo ambalo walizungumzia na wakakubaliana kama waziri wa fedha, waziri wa kazi, labor, na pia there were 3 of them, walikuwa watatu, na waziri wa ugatuzi, wakakubaliana kweli kwamba wanakwenda kusubmit ama kupeana cabinet memo ili pesa ambayo ilikuwa bilioni 2,600,816 iweze kuwekwa katika bajeti ya mwaka wa 2023 na 24 ili iweze kuwalipa councillors wa zamani ambayo walikuwa 11,909 na pia milioni 218 iweze kulipa councillors ambayo walifanya kazi zaidi ya term 3. Ni lini mambo ilibadilika ambaye katika seneti hii? Mheshimiwa, najaribu kuongea Kiswahili kabisa ndio councillors waweze kuelewa. Ni lini hiyo ilibadilika ambaye seneti hii inaweza pronounce itself, sijui inaitwaje kwa Kiswahili, kujieleza kupitia namna mbili. Ya kwanza ni wakuwa na ile mkataba motion, ya pili ni wakipitisha sheria. Seneti hii ilipitisha mkataba ikasema ya kwamba hawa former councillors ambayo walikuwa ni 11,400 waweze kulipwa pesa. Tukazungumza, tukapiga mikutano hapa. Waziri wa fedha ambaye ndiye alikuwa kabla ya rafiki yangu Mbadi kuja, alikuja katika kamati ya labor. Alipotoka hapa, inakumbuka vizuri sana, ilikuwa Aprili tarehe 23. Tarehe 23 akatueleza ya kwamba hao wenyewe wamekubaliana wanakwenda submit cabinet memo ili hii pesa iwekwe kwenye bajeti. Je, ningependa kujua hii pesa iliwekwa kwa bajeti alafu ikarudi kaondolewa kwa sababu hawa ni watu ambao wamezeeka, hawana faida. Na ukijaribu kuangalia ni kwamba hao ndio wamefanya tuje hapa. Hao ndio walitengeneza. Kama si hao ugatuzi ingeweza kuja. So Mheshimiwa Speaker, ningependa kujua katika kweli ni lini jambo hili lilibadilika. Ya pili, nikienda kumalizia,
Honorable
Mheshimiwa,
you're entitled to only one supplementary question.
Hiyo ni swali hiyo moja.
Order paper. No, under our standing orders.
Mheshimiwa Speaker, hiyo ni swali moja, swali ndio ngumu. Naomba tu nikubalie kwa sababu kama ningekuwa naeleza na Kizungu ingekuwa imeflow vizuri.
Conclude.
Mheshimiwa Mbadi ametueleza ya kwamba alipata ujumbe kutoka kwenye Attorney General ya kwamba hii jambo halifai kufanywa. Sheria. Mimi nauliza, wakati ile Mheshimiwa Ndongo alikuja kwenye kamati ya kazi ya labor, hakuwa amezungumza na huyo Attorney General kumweleza kwamba mimi sasa nakwenda kule nishawishi, na badala kabla hawajapeleka hii mkataba wao katika cabinet, kwa sababu hao wenyewe walisema wakuwa watatu, 3 cabinet secretaries watapeleka joint memo, cabinet memo ndio hiyo hela iwekwe kwenye kwa nini kwenye bajeti. Ni lini hii ilibadilika? Ama ni ile mchezo ya paka na panya ambaye inakimbia hivi, leo tunasema tunapatia hawa, lakini kwa sababu hawana ile siasa, political clout, wanatupwa nje. Mheshimiwa Speaker, ningependa kujua kwa sababu maisha ya hawa former councillors ni maisha ambaye lazima tuwapiganie, kwa sababu leo hii Mheshimiwa Mbadi akisema ati tunabadilisha tuweke kama inua jamii, hiyo itakuwa ni discrimination. Kweli unawezaje kusema na inua jamii ya councillor nampa 1,200 na pia naenda kuinua jamii ya baba ya Ledamo unampatia shilingi 2,000? Hiyo kweli inawezekana? Hiyo kweli, je, hiyo ni ungwana? Asante.
Now, honorable senators, allow the honorable CS to respond, because in his response, I believe he may even address some of the issues that are yet to be raised. Honorable CS, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first of all, I want to state categorically that it's not in my interest to deny former councillors what is rightfully theirs. What I'm emphasizing on is, yes, it is desirable to pay these former councillors. Many of them are suffering, having served this country and having been in public offices and respected personalities in their right in this country. But we must do it within the law. Now, I have been asked by Senator Wambua a few questions, I think about two. One, whether the House can act in vain. My answer is no. The House should not act in vain. Did we write to the Speaker?
Senator Eddy and Senator Fogarisha kindly.
Did my office write to the Speaker on this matter or the opinion of the Attorney General? Unfortunately, I don't think we did. We didn't write to inform the Speaker. So the question here that has been asked is, there was a task force that was set up and the resolution of the House. First of all, let me start with the task force. Is the report of the task force binding? My understanding is no, it is not. Why? Because the Constitution, which Senator Boni Aluale mentioned, provision number 94, or Article 94, 5, says no person or body, including task forces, other than Parliament, has the power to make provision having the force of the law in Kenya, except under authority conferred by this Constitution or by legislation. I am yet to see the provision in our Constitution or any written law passed by this Parliament which has authorized a task force formed to approve payment to former councillors. If there is that provision, I would obey and pay. Make provision in our budget and pay, but there is none. So that task force remains a task force. Its report should be implemented procedurally, which has not. So up to now, there is no, out of the task force, which should have, a legislation should have flown automatically from the task force report to now anchor it in law, and that has not been done. Now, on a question by Senator Faki, why I have not respected or obeyed what former CS is committed to do. Unfortunately, I want to report to the Senate that yes, my predecessor, Honorable Yatani, or even Honorable Ndungu, probably made a commitment, but they didn't pay. The person who is paying now is myself. I cannot pay unless backed by the law. Because when now it will raise issues, I am the one accountable. I'm the one responsible. I cannot hide behind people who made commitments or intentions and didn't pay. So the paymaster now is myself. If they paid, I would have come here to report that they paid. But they didn't pay. And they left it for me to pay, and I'm checking the legal framework, and I don't see it. A question was asked about the Attorney General's powers. My reading of Article 156 is this, that the Attorney General is the principal legal advisor to the government. Now, being the principal legal advisor, I take his advice or her advice very seriously. And the Attorney General gave advice on 8th of May 2023 on this, and that advice has not been vacated or changed. Senator Boni Aluale has asked me about, again, Parliament legislating in vain. I want to say again, Parliament cannot legislate in vain. The only thing that I said is, and we have been in this House with Senator Boni Aluale for a while, we know the power and the force that a motion has and a bill. An act of Parliament. A motion usually, and by the way, this has been the legislative practice, that if you want a bill to pass easily, you craft it in a motion. That motion is debated, and once you succeed with the motion, then you follow through by generating a bill to actualize your motion. How I wish that Senator Wambua, who raised this matter, brought it to the House through a motion, followed through by bringing a legislation to anchor whatever the House resolved into law to allow for payment. If that is done, I will definitely obey the legal framework. As to the President's commitment to pay the councillors, I want to again read Article 94 of the Constitution, that no person, and there is no exclusion here, no person or body, whether President or anybody else, other than Parliament, has the power to make provision having the force of law in Kenya, except under authority conferred by the Constitution or by legislation. I am yet to see where power has been given to the President to give authority for payment that is not anchored in law. So what I would advise is if the President initiate through the executive a legislative proposal which would now give me the legal basis upon which this payment can be made, I will obey. Senator Lekina, Senator for Narok County, since when did we start? In fact, it was in Kiswahili, but I'm trying to translate it into English, that an agreement by 3 CSs be changed. I am not changing the task force report. What I'm saying is that task force report has made recommendations. Those recommendations now should be anchored in law to allow me to make payment to former councillors. And when did this change? It has not changed. The task force recommendation still stands. But we have to now actualize it. Did Professor Njuguna Ndung'u speak to the Attorney General before coming before the Senate? I wish I knew. I have not consulted him to know whether he did. But I thought he must have consulted, because for the Attorney General to give opinion on 8th of May 2023, that opinion must have been sought from the National Treasury. And the CS then was Professor Njuguna Ndung'u. So I am very sure he must have, in one way, communicated with the Attorney General. On the Inua Jamii, I was not saying that we pay the former councillors this gratuity, pension or honorarium through Inua Jamii program. What I mentioned is that we are working with the line ministry to make sure that these former councillors, those who deserve to be enrolled under Inua Jamii program, are enrolled in the normal way to get support like any other qualified Kenyans, including those who have not served as councillors. Thank you.
Now, honorable senators, we need to make progress on this very weighty matter. And I know that if I'm to give an opportunity to any of you, there will be no bigger departure from what has already been said by the senators who've spoken before. Now, you will note that there is a willingness to pay from the executive, right from the president to the ministry. The biggest obstacle that has been observed from the response by the Honorable CS is lack of legal framework. And therefore, Honorable Senators, allow me to, pursuant to Standing Order Number 1, refer this matter to the Committee of Labor, working together with the Ministry of Finance and the Office of the Attorney General, within 60 days to come up with a legal framework within which we can actualize the recommendations of the task force so that the councillors are paid their due. If that's find favor, we will rest it at that. So, Honorable CS, this matter has now been referred to the Labour Committee, which will work with you and the Office of the Attorney General to come up with a legal framework within which the former councillors can get their dues. We'll leave it at that. We will now move to the second question directed to, yes.
Honorable Speaker, thank you for your guidance, and I'm okay with your guidance. And I've realized the lacuna where it is. So, Mr. Speaker, I was asking, is it possible also to include the Committee on Budget and Finance? Because it is very critical on this matter. That is the committee that can also be able to get CS Mbadi anytime they want to meet him. Otherwise, Riband does not know the corners of Treasury more than the Committee on Budget and Finance. And also it is a finance matter, Honorable Speaker, so it is better also that committee to be involved.
Very well. In fact, 3 committees will work together with the CS Treasury and the Office of the Attorney General, the Labor Committee, JLAC, and Finance and Budget. And we need that report to be laid before the Senate within 60 days. The earlier, the better. We move to the second question. Question number 25. Senator Boni, proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask question number 25 as in the order paper. And Mr. Speaker, allow me to congratulate the Minister for the candid manner in which he has handled this matter of gross national importance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, could the Minister provide a list of programs in Kenya relating to education, food security, governance that were being implemented by the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, at the time of freezing of foreign assistance from the United States of America? B, Mr. Speaker, what is the total funding requirement for each of the said programs, and could the Cabinet Secretary specify the amount of funds that USAID was projected to provide in the financial year 2024-25? C, what interim measures has the government put in place to address the funding gap that has emerged as a result of the freeze of foreign assistance from the US to ensure continuity of the critical services? And finally, D, could the Cabinet Secretary also outline the government's long-term plans to reduce reliance on foreign aid and to ensure sustainability in financing for the critical programs in sectors such as education, health, food security, and governance? I thank you.
Cabinet Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, allow me also to reciprocate the magnanimity of Senator Boni Halwale by saying that I also appreciate the Senator for being proactive in this matter, not to wait until there are challenges out of this freeze of funding to now ask questions, being proactive and asking well in advance. Since the senators read the question, I don't want to read the question again, but it's question number 025. And this is my response, Mr. Speaker and honorable members. Mr. Speaker and honorable senators, first and foremost, allow me to acknowledge the invaluable support from the government of the United States of America to the people of Kenya for over 6 decades. We enjoy cordial and enduring partnership between the United States and Kenya that has led to healthy collaboration in a wide range of initiatives, such as access to education, improving quality health care through nutrition, family planning, and maternal and child health, including malaria, tuberculosis, HIV/AIDS, and strengthening of the healthcare system, support for economic growth through trade, agriculture, and infrastructure initiatives, fostering democracy, governance, and conflict interventions that directly impact the lives of millions of Kenyans. So cognizant of the executive order titled Reevaluating and Realigning United States Foreign Aid, issued ordering a 90-day pause on all U.S. foreign development assistance programs to conduct a review, the National Treasury wishes the Senate to note the following: that the U.S. government provides foreign aid primarily in grants form to Kenya using several U.S. government agencies whom we have existing development cooperation framework with, including U.S. Department of State, U.S. Agency for International Development, or what is known as USAID, U.S. Trade Development Agency, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, the United States President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, Development Finance Corporation, and the U.S. African Development Foundation. We signed the Development Cooperation Framework Agreement, DCFA, with USAID on the 8th of December 2019. The initial contribution was US dollars 50,016,204, but this has since been increased to US dollars 1,695,978,754, which is equivalent to 220 million, to Kenya shillings 220 billion 477,238,020. So the DCFA is valid up to 30th of September 2028. Mr. Speaker, with those highlights, now I wish to respond to the question number 25 by the Senator for Kakamega County, Senator Boni Alwale, as follows. On the question of could the Cabinet Secretary provide a list of all programs in Kenya relating to education, food security, and governance that were being implemented by the United States Agency for International Development at the time of freezing of the foreign assistance to the United States of America. I wish to state, Honorable Speaker, that attached to my written response is the list of the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID-funded programs in Kenya relating to education, food security, and governance, which are appended as Annex number 1. And under education, if you go to that annex, it's page 14, my submission. I hope all members have it, or the members who have this response from me have them. Under education, there is US dollars 22.3 million, and I've highlighted where this money would be spent: training of teachers to enhance reading instructions, providing support to Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Maybe I continue. Under education, I said that there is 22.3 million US dollars, and just giving examples of where this money would have been spent or would be spent is improving early grade literacy across public primary schools. I want to single out that there was support for providing to public TVETs in Kilifi, Mombasa, Nakuru, and Machakos to align training to industry needs. providing scholarships to youth to attend TVETs, and support for the newly established Open University of Kenya to build systems for instructional delivery and establish partnership with private sector and universities in the US and globally. So that is where, those are the areas where the education money was going to. Under governance, a number of issues being dealt with, but the amount that was available for this was 8.6 million USD. Under food security, it was a little higher, 128 million, and that is equivalent of 16.5 billion shillings. This was supporting a number of NGOs, supporting programs including Dadaab and Kakuma refugee camps, supporting improved farming practices, supporting county governments, NGOs and UN agencies, and especially in ASAL areas, in providing foods and relief to over 2.5 million people. So, and the details are there, Mr. Speaker. The second question, what is the total funding requirement for each of the said programs, and could the Cabinet Secretary specify the amount of funds that you said was projected to provide in the year 2024-2025 financial year? Now, the amount for the said programs is approximately the program that I highlighted: food, governance, and education. Those ones, the said programs is approximately 158.9 million US dollars, equivalent of about 20 billion Kenya shillings, while the total assistance, including health and the others, is approximately US dollars 405.4 million, which is about Kenya shillings 52 billion. For the financial year 24-25, from USAID, which, as I've indicated, includes other sectors such as health, economic growth, water, and environment. Now, Honorable Speaker, it's important to note that while official government assistance, or what is known as ODA, from USAID is aligned to our medium-term plan and supplement government investments and largely benefits the people of Kenya. USAID contracts, implementing partners, that is both international and local, are entities who bear the fiduciary responsibility, because this funding is implemented by implementing partners. The money, as I will state, does not come to our budget. Therefore, USAID support is not reflected in the budget. The National Treasury plays a subsidiary role in facilitating tax exemptions. So that is something worth noting, that this has been off-budget financing from USAID. However, provides very critical services. Now, what interim measures has the government put in place to address the funding gap that has emerged as a result of the freeze of foreign assistance from the USA to ensure continuity of critical services? My response is as follows. Regarding the interim measures to address the funding gaps resulting from the freeze of foreign assistance from the USA, the government has taken the following steps to ensure the continuity of critical services. With the affected state departments, we are conducting a review of our existing budget allocations to prioritize funding for essential services in sectors such as health, education, governance, and food security to be included in the budget estimates of supplementary 3 if it becomes very necessary, because if this funding stops abruptly and there are critical areas, we cannot wait for the 2025-2026 budget. Likewise, county governments are also expected to act accordingly to ensure uninterrupted service delivery for devolved functions. We are also engaging with other development partners to explore opportunities for additional funding and technical assistance to plug the gap. For instance, the Universal Healthcare Agenda reforms under the Social Health Authority, SHA, vulnerable populations will gain access to a broad spectrum of benefits, including screening, dialysis, kidney transplants, essential medications, and vital medical equipment, and plug the gap by some of the interventions that were being performed by USAID. The other question was that could the Cabinet Secretary also outline the government's long-term plans to reduce reliance on foreign aid and to ensure sustainable financing for critical programs in sectors such as education, health, food security, and governance? And this is my response, Mr. Speaker. Like you have observed, this administrative action has actually exposed our vulnerabilities. and calls for concerted efforts to address them to ensure Kenyan self-reliance. Our Vision 2030 overarching goal is to transform Kenya into a newly industrializing, middle-income country, providing a high quality of life to all Kenyans or citizens. The journey to self-reliance requires broad-based economic development. The government is implementing the journey to self-reliance requires broad-based economic development. And the government is implementing policies, programs, projects, and interventions in the bottom-up economic transformation agenda to enhance agricultural transformation, support macro, small, and medium enterprises, provide affordable housing and settlement, achieve universal health care, and support growth of digital superhighway and creative economy for job creation. Mr. Speaker, in this year's budget policy statement, which is titled Consolidating Gains and a Bottom-up Economic Transformation Agenda for Inclusive Green Growth, we have outlined the fiscal consolidation measures to reduce public debt vulnerabilities while providing fiscal space to deliver essential public goods and services. Fiscal consolidation will be supported by concerted expenditure rationalization and revenue mobilization efforts. This will bring public debt on downwards path, consistent with Kenya's debt anchor. To boost revenue, emphasis will be placed on a combination of tax administrative and tax policy reforms that include strengthening tax administration for enhanced compliance through expansion of the tax base, minimizing tax expenditures, leveraging on technology to revolutionize tax processes, sealing revenue loopholes, and enhancing the efficiency of tax system, and focusing on non-tax revenues that ministries, departments, and agencies can raise through the services they offer to the public. The government will also sustain efforts to strengthen accountability, transparency, and a revenue mobilization path guided by the medium-term revenue strategy that makes tax regime more efficient, equitable, and progressive. These deliberate efforts will be put in place to strike a right balance between the need to create a stronger and more reliable revenue stream and the need to protect the critical masses who have been grossly affected by the prevailing macroeconomic shocks. To strengthen expenditure control and improve efficiency and effectiveness in public spending, the government will rationalize and reduce non-essential expenditure, roll out an end-to-end e-procurement system to maximize value for money, and increase transparency in procurement. Operationalize the Public Investment Management Information System to automate public investment management process, revamp the Public Service Pension Administration through digitization and re-engineering of the pension management system, and expedite governance reforms targeting state corporations. To strengthen public finance management, the government will fast-track the process of transitioning from cash basis to accrual basis of accounting to improve cash management and enhance financial and fiscal reporting, and entrench the adopted zero-based budgeting approach while finalizing the financial year 2025-26 budget estimate to reorient our budgeting and expenditure framework. The government will also operationalize the asset and inventory management modules in our IFMIS for all MDAs, and this will enable the government to have full visibility of all assets and inventory and facilitate optimal assets utilization and ensure idle and unserviceable assets are disposed in conformity with existing legal requirements. I want to add that most of these measures that I've already put here, Mr. Speaker, many of them are at their advanced stages of implementation. For example, the case of e-procurement, we are onboarding almost all MDAs by the beginning of next month, and we are doing a test run all the way to June 30th, and by July 1st, all MDAs, including county government, should be all onboarded into e-procurement system to make efficient, effective our procurement system and realized economy in the procurement. The case of actual accounting, already my committee is implementing it, which is headed by my PS. I delegated that to him, and he's doing an excellent job, even in terms of inventory and investment management. So all these measures that I've pointed out here are already at advanced stages of implementation. They are just not thoughts, not wish lists. They are not intentions. We are actualizing them. Now, to crowd in private sector in the provision of public services, the government will scale up use of public-private partnerships, framework for commercially viable projects. I know PPP has actually been scandalized. We are trying to revamp it and re-engineer it and rebrand it so that Kenyans may appreciate the PPP as an alternative to financing major infrastructural development, which would reduce pressure on our fiscal space. The government is also piloting a new human resource management system, which will be rolled out to all national government ministries and departments, as well as all county governments, in order to improve the management of the wage bill, including statutory payroll deductions. In view of the constrained fiscal environment, prioritization during resource allocation will be critical in ensuring low priority expenditures are dropped or deferred to give way to high priority service delivery programs. Ministries, departments, and agencies are therefore required to reevaluate all the existing or planned activities, projects, and programs to be funded in financial year 25-26 and in the medium-term budget. Sector working groups are required to eliminate wasteful expenditures and pursue priorities which are aimed at safeguarding livelihoods, creating jobs, reviving businesses, and economic recovery. I want to add that we have already put a zero-based budgeting model into the IFMIS for this budget that we are just processing at the moment. So sector working groups should also ensure that all expenditure items in the financial year 25-26 budget are justified, and emphasis is placed on allocating the limited resources based on program efficiency and requirement than incremental budgeting. Before I finish, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to point out that the day before yesterday, I actually had a meeting with the Charge d'Affaires of the United States in Kenya, and this is what I want to add to the response that I've just given. We discussed at length, and it is clear, as I said, that U.S. has been giving us support directly through implementing partners, not through the budgetary support. The programs after this, out of this executive order, which have been running in this country, were about 100. With this executive order, the programs may reduce only to 15. So these are the areas that are going to be saved from the discussion I had with them, and I requested him to give me a write-up on what the impact of this executive order is, including areas that are not going to be affected, and he stated that life-saving interventions will not be affected. Emergency like infectious diseases, e.g. Ebola, those ones will not be affected in terms of fund cuts. Emergency food assistance will also be preserved or not affected or saved. And finally, our mission in Haiti through our police force will also be supported still. So the executive order does not affect those areas. The life-saving interventions, emergency food assistance, and our mission in Haiti, those ones will still continue to enjoy the U.S. funding. So, Mr. Speaker, even as we pursue these risk mitigating measures, we remain hopeful that we shall continue strengthening our bilateral ties with the U.S., notwithstanding of the outcome of the 90-day review on foreign aid. We discussed at length with the team from the U.S. Embassy, and they have also indicated areas where they still want to continue cooperating with us, and they re-emphasized that the foreign policy around Kenya is still intact and remains intact. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I submit.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Honorable Senators, due to time, I will not be taking any supplementary questions except from Boni Kalwale. You can ask one supplementary question if you're still not satisfied with the response.
Mike. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am satisfied with the answer that has been given by the Minister, and I want to regret, on behalf of the people of Kakamega, Mombasa, Nakuru, Kilifi, and Isiolo, that 1.1 billion shillings, which was earmarked for promoting accountability in delivery of services in those counties and reducing fraud and wastage and abuse of resources in the health sector, has fallen on its face. Mr. Speaker, because of where we are, I want to draw the attention of the Minister to page 9 of his answer, bullet 8.3, where you have mentioned the issue of the Social Health Authority. Mr. Minister, since you're trying to look for ways of bridging the gap, the universal health, where it has succeeded elsewhere in the world, the funding model is clearly based on what comes from the National Treasury, plus what they realize from the contributions for members who subscribe into the program for insurance, and finally, an element of out-of-pocket. Could you clarify to the country, Minister, that the current funding model of SHA does not factor in any money from the National Treasury? Given, Mr. Minister, that in your budget you have 134.5 billion shillings thereabout to the Ministry of Health, which remains at which is going to remain at Afi House, can I plead on behalf of the Kenyans that that 134 billion shillings that is remaining at Afi House, you should take upwards of 50%, 80%, 60%, and take it into SHA so that it can be the national government's contribution to cushion the program, because the noise I'm hearing across the country, Minister, is about funding. People are happy about SHA, but the funding doesn't appear to be sustainable. Can you undertake to go and learn and borrow from the way it is done in other countries, the UK included, on how universal health care is funded? I'm afraid, Minister, the noise we are hearing is not about to come to an end. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator
Thank
Boni.
you,
Cabinet
Mr.
Secretary,
Speaker.
please respond.
Thank you.
Proceed, Cabinet Secretary. Senator Cherargei, I did. Yes, so I have told you we have run out of time. There's another Cabinet Secretary waiting. What questions? The question has been answered. This is a supplementary question. Senator Cherargei, we are not going to engage each other in a verbal exchange. Cabinet Secretary, please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Cherargei, that is enough. We have run. Let the Cabinet Secretary reply, please. No. No. Allow the Cabinet Secretary to respond. Cabinet Secretary, please respond.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just to quickly address the two issues that Senator Boni Alwale has raised. On his regrets, I agree that funding issues like advocacy and support on fight against corruption will be affected, certainly. And we may not have enough resources to support such programs, but it is regrettable because we really need accountability in the country. So I agree with Senator Alwale on that. Secondly, on the issue of universal health cover, again, I want to agree with Senator Boni Alwale that this program is contentious everywhere in the world. There's no country that I know of which has implemented universal health coverage without issues around it, either political, people who feel it should not be implemented, especially in developed democracies, or it is issues around how to implement it. But again, as a country, I think in manifestos of major political parties, we promised universal health coverage. But we must implement it properly. The issues around SHA is not that SHA is not right. It is the good thing, it's the right thing to do, but the issues around it is, are we doing it properly? So this is the question that we need to do. So what am I going to do from the Treasury perspective? From the Treasury, I'm going to insist on rationalization of our budget to put money where it is needed. I just want to tell Senator Luale that it is the Treasury has supported SHA. It's not true that we haven't supported. Even in the current supplementary 2, we have allocation of 6 billion to support SHA, 3 billion to support primary health care, and another 3 billion to support critical care, health care. By the way, it may interest members to understand also from the information I have is that the critical health care was not being provided under NHIF. But under SHA, the government has insisted we must provide it. And we must make resources available. We will, apart from the deductions from members, which is basically insurance, it is not actually expenditure. The money that is collected from Kenyans, if you take the best case scenario that no Kenyan falls sick, that money should not be spent, it should remain there. So it's not an expenditure. That is why when you look at our fiscal framework, we have removed the SHA allocation, the 73 billion, from the fiscal framework because it is not an expenditure. But the government must also put in money to support healthcare in the country. So you will see in the budget our allocation to support this health program. Because it is critical, we must do it. And I hope and I believe that the line ministry will do justice to Kenyans by making this system work, make it more efficient, and make it more accountable. The problems which are there were bound also to be there because any new thing must have challenges. But those challenges must be dealt with within a period of time so that the system works. We cannot afford to lose this. We cannot afford to lose this system. This system is the best for this country, especially with these challenges around some of the health programs that were being supported by USAID. We need a system that caters for the vulnerable of the society. And so mine was, Mr. Speaker, just largely to agree with Honorable Alwale. And I've taken note of your suggestion and advice to my ministry on how to deal with the funding to the health ministry. I will act accordingly.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. We shall give you leave now. Wish you all the best in the hard task ahead. And probably we'll see you next time you're in this house to ask you more questions. Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Yes, Senator Cherargei. Give Senator Cherargei the mic.
Mr. Speaker, looking at the number of questions that is there, it is good to advise some of us because we have been sitting since morning, whether now that the Minister of Interior is coming and he has a lot of more than 10 questions, it is good to guide us early that if there will be no space for supplementary question, it's good to advise the House so that some of us don't have to wait. If we will not get a chance, then why did we put at the standing order that supplementary questions will be provided? In fact, the standing order should only allow the people who are asking the questions to ask the question. Because, Mr. Speaker, it's unfair. Members come here at 9:30, we sit through, we try to ask further supplementary questions, or even to assist in the guidance of the House, Mr. Speaker. We are not being given the chance. I'm not saying not only me, but a number of colleagues who have sat here since morning, Mr. Speaker. So looking at the next minister, he has almost more than 10 questions, and looking at even if, Speaker, even if you are to indulge the House to rise at 1:15, it will not be sufficient. So is it understanding order number 1 that you guide, or the questionnaires or people who are requesting supplementary questions, the owners of the questions in words, can drop their supplementary questions and ask and allow other members to ask further questions, if that will be okay? But if it is not possible, Mr. Speaker, understanding order number 1, kindly guide the House so that members do not expect to ask. We can be good listeners and we can listen through, Mr. Speaker. Because mine was just simple. I just wanted to find out from the CS Mbadi, what is the position of USAID on the payment of universal health coverage, for example? Because it's a live issue. I know you have UHC in Garissa, I have UHC, they are in Kericho. Mine was just to seek clarification. Is the cabinet minister in charge of Treasury looking with the suspension of USAID? Is there a way that they have been catering for UHC? And finally, Mr. Speaker, is also, we need your ruling and interpretation, Mr. Speaker, understanding order number 1. When a cabinet minister comes with the questions, even from your dashboard, you can tell whether there is a sufficient answer to the question. Is there, in your wisdom, understanding order number 1 on the ruling, to provide to the House, if from the face value the minister has not answered the question adequately, is there, from your position, looking at the reaction of members, to direct that the minister withdraws that response and maybe comes back from 14 to 7 days, Mr. Speaker, so that we also don't waste time? The reason we're asking more questions is because maybe the response from the minister is not sufficient enough. So, Mr. Speaker, I need your guidance on standing order number 1, on where the cabinet ministers are giving answers that do not satisfy the House, or we feel that the cabinet minister, Mr. Speaker, has not taken the House seriously, Mr. Speaker. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to request, with your indulgence, if we're having Minister of Interior, we're having Minister of Treasury, we're having Minister of Labor, is there a possible way that going into the future, when we have ministers that have many questions, is there a way we can have them give us 2, for example, Minister of Treasury and Education, because we want to agree there are many issues? Is there a way Senate Business Committee can sit and agree, Mr. Speaker? I thank you for that indulgence.
Thank you very much, Senator Cherargei. What you're raising is very valid. And I think we will be taking it up with the SBC so that we cannot be cramping up ministries which are very big, with very big dockets and a lot of questions to the ministry. So I think today we had 3 cabinet secretaries, and it was quite evident that we were not able to manage our time properly. Now, as far as the questions to the Cabinet Secretary for Interior National Administration, we seem to have 6 questions. Maybe I would like to propose that we get all the 6 questions asked. We see how much time we have after that, so that we can know how many supplementary questions we can take thereafter. So we will ask the 6 questions without any supplementaries. And then after the 6 questions have been replied, we will see how many supplementary questions we can take. Is that in order, Honorable Senators? Very well, thank you. Question number 21 by Beatrice Ogola. Sorry, Cabinet Secretary, I did not welcome you into the House. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Beatrice, please give mic to Senator Beatrice. If you could please ask the question as it appears on the order paper so that we can save time.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. My question is, one, could the Cabinet Secretary provide details on the level of preparedness in mitigation of drought and floods, given the devastation that was experienced in the country during the heavy rains in 2024 and in the previous years too? Are there specific areas that have been particularly mapped out for such mitigation? And what strategies have been put in place for such zones? And lastly, how much has been set aside in the year 2024-25 budget earmarking disaster and emergency response? Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Cabinet Secretary? And also, with your indulgence, please, if we could request that you summarize the reply as much as possible, the response, because the answers have already been circulated to the members.